Somewhere deep in the coastal lowcountry of South Carolina, hidden behind crumbling plantation walls and locked cabinets, there lies a set of ledgers that should never have survived. 52 deaths, all written in the same cold handwriting. All recorded with the precision of a man documenting livestock instead of human beings. Every entry ends with the same chilling line, body disposed of in accordance with standard procedure. What makes these deaths terrifying is not the number. It is the fact that every single one of them was legal. Public, witnessed, even celebrated, and the families who once applauded those deaths have spent more than a century trying to erase the truth. But one record escaped their control. And what it reveals about the man later called the Reaper of the Pines is something no museum, no textbook, and no historian has ever dared to touch. Before we continue, take a breath. Because what you are about to hear was never meant to leave the archives. Part 1, The Clearing in the Pines. The year was 1847. Charleston was booming. Newspapers bragged about prosperity. Cotton profits made the planter class feel untouchable. In the city, wealthy families drank imported brandy in parlors lined with French wallpaper. They discussed land, money, politics. And they shared secrets. Secrets about private gatherings that polite society pretended not to hear. 20 miles inland, where the Ashley River curved through endless fields, stood the Hartwell Plantation. 3,000 acres. Nearly 200 enslaved people forced to work from sunup to sundown. To the outside world, the estate looked peaceful. Magnificent. The white columns of the main house gleamed in the sun like polished marble. Visitors admired the manicured lawns and the orchard behind the kitchen house. They never saw what happened in the pine forest beyond the tobacco barns. Marcus Hartwell had inherited the plantation at 28. Along with the grand house and the long family name came something else. Crushing debt. His father had been generous to anyone who asked for credit, too gentle to enforce discipline, and too weak to run a business in a world where cruelty meant profit. The plantation survived, but barely. The books bled money. Marcus was nothing like his father. Cold, ambitious, calculating. Within 6 months of taking control, he fired the overseer who had worked the land for 15 years. He replaced him with a man known only by his last name, Cruz. Cruz carried a reputation from Mississippi. Higher production than any plantation around. High mortality too, but no one in the planter class cared about that. Profit, not humanity, was the measure of a man. People remembered Cruz's eyes. Cold, gray, emotionless. He looked at every person, enslaved or free, the same way a butcher looks at an animal. A calculation of weight, of usefulness, of how much value could be pulled from a body before it broke. One night, after reviewing the plantation's failing numbers, Cruz made a suggestion. He poured whiskey without asking permission, leaned back in his chair, and said, "You are missing a source of income every other wealthy man already knows about." Marcus looked up from the ledger. What income? Entertainment. Not the kind mentioned in polite company. Not the type you find in Charleston theaters. Something darker. Something private. Something that could draw men willing to pay $50 or more for a night they could never admit to their wives. Cruz explained that planters near Savannah had been doing it for years. Quiet gatherings. Gentlemen's sport, they called it. A place to deal with troublesome workers and satisfy wealthy appetites at the same time. Every plantation has men who are too proud, Cruz said. Men who resist. Men who stand too tall. You can work them to death slowly, or you can make them profitable. Marcus did not answer that night. But the seed was planted. For 3 days he did nothing except think. He studied the numbers again and again. $18,000 in inherited debt. Crops barely profitable. No future, unless he found another stream of income. The fights were dangerous. They risked exposure. But they also offered something else. A chance to rise. A chance to create something exclusive. Something men would brag about in whispers. Something that could make Marcus wealthy enough to escape the failures of his father. On August 23, 1847, Marcus gave Cruz permission to begin. The first fight took place 3 weeks later. The ring was built in a clearing 300 yards into the pine trees. Rope tied between wooden posts. Crude benches arranged in a circle. torches stuck into the ground. It looked like a hunting camp, except the prey was human. 23 men attended that first night. Planters from neighboring estates, merchants from Charleston, men who wanted to see something brutal, something forbidden, something that confirmed their power over the world. The fighters were two enslaved men labeled as problems. One had talked back to an overseer. The other had been caught learning to read. Both were forced into the ring with no choice. The rules were simple: fight until one man could not stand. No weapons, no mercy. The winner would receive extra food rations. The loser would be sold downriver to Louisiana, where death came quickly in sugar fields. The fight lasted 11 bloody minutes. When it ended, one man lay unconscious, his jaw shattered. The other stood shaking, hands torn open, eyes empty. The spectators roared with excitement. They threw money. They shouted for more. Marcus saw something that night. Not the violence, not the suffering. He saw profit. $400 in bets on the first night alone. More than the plantation made in weeks. He saw his future. He also saw something else. The fighter who won. A tall, powerful man born and raised on the plantation. In the ledger, he was property number 127. Among the enslaved, he was known as Solomon. Solomon did not celebrate. He did not eat the meat he earned. He walked back to the slave quarters and lay in silence. Something inside him had broken, even though his body still stood. But to Marcus, Solomon looked like opportunity. The whispers spread quickly through Charleston. Men talked in coded language about the spectacle in the pines. By October, strangers were sending letters to the Hartwell plantation, asking about upcoming events. Crews expanded the operation. The ring became a pit dug into the ground. Wooden walls rose high enough to contain the fighters. Tiered seats were built for better views. A small building was constructed to store equipment and hold men before they were forced into combat. It cost $200. Marcus paid without hesitation. He knew the investment would return far more than it cost. And it did. Within a year, the Reaper of the Pines would earn a reputation whispered across the South. But that is a story for part 2. If you'd like, I can now create part 2 in the same tone and length. Part 2, the night the crowds returned. Hook. The second fight was never supposed to be bigger than the first. It was meant to be a quiet repeat, a simple attraction for a few wealthy men who enjoyed secrets more than sunlight. But secrets spread quickly among the powerful, especially when those secrets involve blood, money, and a fighter who seemed impossible to defeat. What happened on that October night would change the South Carolina Lowcountry forever. And it would be the first time anyone whispered the name that would haunt the region for generations. The Reaper of the Pines. Part 2, a legend takes shape. The invitations for the second fight went out in mid-October. They were printed on expensive paper, thick enough to feel like a promise and elegant enough to disguise their purpose. Trusted enslaved men delivered them by horseback. The messages described an evening of entertainment that could not be found anywhere in Charleston. They also requested discretion, something the planter class valued almost as much as profit. Each seat cost $75. Every seat sold out in 4 days. Solomon fought again on October 28. His opponent was a man from a neighboring plantation who had killed an overseer with a shovel. The crowd that night was larger, 37 men, including a state legislator and 2 judges. Their presence gave the gathering an unspoken legitimacy, a suggestion that what happened in those woods belonged to the privileges of their class. The fight did not last long. Solomon, quiet and unreadable, moved with a precision he had not possessed just weeks earlier. He studied the other man the way a hunter studies wounded prey. He waited for a weakness, found it, and struck. 6 minutes later the man lay on the floor of the pit, ribs shattered, gasping for air like someone drowning on land. The crowd erupted. Bets totaled over $800. Men who had placed winning wagers laughed loudly, slapped each other on the back, and congratulated Hartwell on hosting such a thrilling event. That night, several spectators approached Marcus privately. They wanted more fights, more speed, more brutality. They wanted to bring friends who would pay even higher prices. They wanted a ritual, not a rarity. By November, Solomon had fought 4 times. By December, 6. Every fight drew larger crowds. Every fight brought higher stakes. Every fight tightened the hold this bloody spectacle had on the wealthy men of the region. Hartwell sensed opportunity. He commissioned a ledger dedicated solely to the events. He hired a clerk from Charleston, a thin, hollow man with elegant handwriting and no noticeable conscience. The clerk recorded each fight the way a banker records transactions. Cold, precise, mechanical. The entries paint a nightmare in ink. December 14, 1847. Property Brita 127 versus property on loan from Middleton Estate. Duration, 8 minutes. Result, visiting property deceased. Cause, trauma to head and chest. Revenue, $2,240. Net, $2,060. The word deceased appeared more often as the months passed. Solomon never lost. And something more disturbing began to emerge. He no longer seemed to avoid killing. There was no joy in it, no hesitation, and no cruelty. Only efficiency. He had learned that the faster he ended a fight, the fewer bones he would break in his own hands. He learned to conserve his breath. He learned to strike in ways that collapsed lungs, crushed jaws, or shattered ribs. By the spring of 1848, Solomon had killed 7 men in the pit. The financial transformation of Hartwell Plantation was stunning. The debts left by Marcus's father were paid off. 2 adjacent properties were purchased. 70 enslaved people were added to the workforce. Hartwell's name, once whispered with pity, was now spoken with respect. Men who had never acknowledged him now invited him to dinners, offered him business partnerships, and treated him as one of their own. But something else was happening behind the scenes. Something no ledger could capture. Solomon was changing. Cruz, the overseer, saw it first. He watched Solomon train involuntarily through labor, watched the way his muscles thickened and hardened, watched the way his pain tolerance climbed beyond anything he had seen. Solomon's hands had become instruments of destruction. Thick layers of callus formed across his knuckles, dense as cured leather. Blows that should have stunned him barely made him blink. His reflexes quickened into something unnatural. One night after a fight that ended in only a few minutes, Cruz spoke up. They were in the plantation office counting the evening's revenue. Cruz said quietly, "He is becoming something else. The others are afraid of him. Not just the fighters. All of them. They will not look him in the eye. They think he is cursed. Or blessed. They are not sure which." Hartwell laughed as he filled his cup with more whiskey. "Fear keeps them obedient," he said. "And an obedient workforce is good for business." Cruz shook his head. "This is not that kind of fear. I have seen this fear just before rebellions. Men believe he is marked by something beyond strength. Something divine or something evil. That confusion makes them dangerous." Hartwell refused to listen. Profit had rewritten his morality. Power had rewritten his judgment. Solomon had become the centerpiece of an institution that no one could publicly acknowledge but everyone wanted to attend. By summer, spectators were traveling from Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia to witness the fights. The pit was expanded again, new benches added, seating arranged to hold more than 100 spectators. Tickets rose to $100 per seat. Every event sold out within days of the whispered announcements. The crowd did not come only for violence. They came for each other. For the shared thrill of the forbidden. For the feeling of being part of something exclusive. Friendships were formed in those torchlit gatherings. Business deals were negotiated between fights. Political alliances were forged above the pit where men bled and died. The fights became a shadow society, separate from Charleston's polite world but deeply connected to its power. And through all of it, the ledger continued its grim record. 10 deaths. 15 deaths, 20 deaths, all ended with the same chilling line written in perfect handwriting. Body disposed of in accordance with standard procedure. No one asked what that procedure was. No one wanted to know what happened to the bodies. But the enslaved people on the plantation knew. They knew about the ravine 3 miles into the pine forest, the one so deep that anything thrown into it vanished forever. They knew about the canvas-wrapped corpses carried before dawn. They knew what it meant when men disappeared without graves. Solomon was 23 years old and had killed 20 men with his bare hands when something unexpected began to happen. He started winning too quickly. Fights that once lasted 10 or 15 minutes now ended in 3. Sometimes 2. And that speed would set in motion events that no one could control. Part 3 begins where the first real fear entered the hearts of the men who believed themselves untouchable. Would you like Part 3 now, in the same tone and length? Part 3, the weapons enter the pit. Hook. There is a moment in every nightmare when it stops being a secret and becomes a monster. For the Hartwell plantation, that moment came when the crowds started complaining. Solomon was killing too fast. The fights were ending before spectators had even finished placing their bets. They wanted fear. They wanted danger. They wanted to watch death crawl toward him instead of lying down at his feet. And so the plantation changed the rules. That was the night the pit became something far darker than entertainment. It became a place where the devil himself looked down to see how men behaved. When they thought no one was watching. Part 3, the blood that made them greedy. By the summer of 1848, a strange problem had emerged. Solomon was too good. Opponents trained specifically for him entered the pit with plans and determination, but most were carried out unconscious or dead before the crowd had settled in their seats. Spectators began to complain. $100 was a fortune. They did not want 4 minutes of violence. They wanted a show. They wanted struggle. They wanted the kind of slow torture that made them feel like this secret society of men was worth the risk of discovery. Cruz offered a solution. Add weapons. Do not use knives. Do not use guns. Nothing that would make the fights end too quickly. Use tools found on any plantation. Chains, wooden poles, hoe handles, cotton hooks, anything that would slow the fights down. Anything that would give Solomon's opponents a theoretical chance. Hartwell agreed immediately. Prophet had taught him to say yes before thinking and think only after counting. The ledger for August 1848 recorded the change with cold precision. New rules introduced to extend contests. Opponents may be armed with agricultural tools. Property number 127 will remain unarmed to maintain competitive balance. That final line had an unintended effect. It made Solomon sound less like a man and more like a creature. Something observed, something measured, something unleashed. The announcement electrified the regular guests. They whispered about the danger. They imagined Solomon wrestling weapons from trained men with his bare hands. They pictured injuries. They pictured blood. Bets increased. Demand soared. The price per seat rose to $125 and still every event sold out. The first fight under the new rules came on a night thick with humidity. The air clung to the skin. Torches struggled to stay lit. Even the insects sounded sluggish. Solomon stepped into the pit with his bare hands, his face unreadable. His opponent carried a cotton hook, a 3-foot tool used to pull bolls from plants. The curved metal blade glinted in the firelight. The man holding it had been trained for weeks. He understood reach. He understood leverage. He understood that this would be his only chance to survive. The fight lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, the man with the cotton hook was dead. Solomon stood in the center of the pit holding the weapon he had torn from the other man's grip. Blood ran down his arms from the places where the blade had slashed him. His chest rose and fell slowly. He stared at the hook as if it were something he was seeing for the first time. Then he dropped it in the dirt and returned to his corner without a sound. The crowd erupted. This was what they wanted. Sustained fear. Visible danger. The possibility that the unthinkable could occur. Bets for the next fight doubled. The next event sold out in less than 2 days. Over the following months, opponents arrived with increasingly creative implements. Chains with locks attached, hoe handles that had been weighted, pieces of fence rail, pitchforks with the metal tips wrapped in canvas to slow the killing. Anything that created spectacle, anything that kept death moving at a pace the audience could savor. Each fight lasted longer. Each fight grew more violent. The pit became a place where bones cracked like twigs and screams mixed with torch smoke. And through it all, Solomon kept winning. By the fall of 1849, Solomon had been fighting for 2 years. The count stood at 32 confirmed deaths. The ledger recorded every one of them with perfect handwriting. Hartwell had become one of the wealthiest landowners in the region. He built an addition onto the main house. He purchased a property in Charleston. He began imagining himself as a future member of Congress. But cracks were forming. The first crack appeared in the slave quarters. At first, Solomon inspired fear. He looked less human than before. His body seemed forged rather than grown. But fear slowly shifted into something else. Respect. Recognition. A dangerous kind of hope. There was a woman named Dinah who worked in the main house. She was 43 years old and had lived through every cruelty plantation life could offer. She had known Solomon since he was a child. She had fed him when he was hungry. She had taught him which herbs in the forest eased pain. She had watched him transform into something the white men thought was their creation but that she knew belonged to no one. Dinah cleaned Hartwell's office twice a week. She could not read much but she understood patterns. She saw the frequency of entries in the ledger. She saw the regular spacing of fights. She understood what each line meant. She understood that all those deaths were tied to Solomon. But she also understood something the whites did not. Every fight showed that a slave could kill a master's property without punishment. It showed that the people in the fields were not as powerless as they had been told. It showed that rules could be broken. It showed that strength could change direction. These thoughts led to quiet conversations. Whispered words in cotton fields. Muted talk in tobacco barns. Barely audible exchanges after the evening bell. People like Isaac from the stables and Ruth from the laundry began to imagine possibilities. Isaac pointed out the most dangerous truth of all. During fights, every important man on the plantation gathered in one place. Every skilled overseer watched the pit. The rest of the plantation was nearly unguarded. If people were organized, if timing was perfect, something could happen. Thomas, a younger man, said that any resistance would lead to certain death. Ruth answered quietly that death was already promised. At least this way they would choose how it came. No plans were formed, no actions taken, but the fact that such talk existed was a sign of a shifting world. Violence had shown itself to be a tool that did not belong solely to the masters. The second crack appeared among the spectators. Some first-time attendees were horrified by what they saw. They vomited. They could not sleep. They called it a glimpse of hell. They never returned. Word spread quietly that the fights were no longer sport but something darker. And even among those who loved the spectacle, attendance stopped growing. The pool of men wealthy enough and morally weak enough to attend was limited. By late 1849, the crowd had become predictable. The same 100 men, the same faces, the same hunger. Cruz saw the truth. The enterprise had reached its peak. Growth had stopped. Risk was increasing. He warned Hartwell. He said they were playing with forces that could not be controlled forever. He suggested shutting everything down. Hartwell refused. Pride had replaced logic. Greed had replaced survival. The path forward was set. And in Part 4, something arrives on the plantation that no one expected. Something that changes the balance of power forever. Would you like Part 4 written now in the same style? Part 4, the night the forest fell silent. Hook. Imagine standing in a forest where every tree seems to breathe. Where every shadow feels alive. Where the wind carries whispers you cannot tell are real or imagined. Now imagine walking into that forest and knowing something inside it is watching you. Something that has tasted blood so many times it no longer remembers being human. That was the world surrounding the Hartwell plantation in the winter of 1849. And that was the world Solomon was reshaping without saying a single word. Part 4. Winter brought cold mornings and long nights, but nothing slowed the fights. The pit lights burned hotter than ever. More men arrived for the spectacle, more money changed hands, and more lives ended beneath the watchful pines. Those trees had seen storms, droughts, and lightning fires. But they had never seen anything like Solomon. He had become a legend whispered about in dark corners of Charleston. A man who fought weapons with his bare hands. A man who never lost. A man who looked less like a slave and more like some ancient creature carved from muscle and instinct. People came expecting terror. Solomon gave them more than that. He gave them fear that clung to the skin. But the plantation itself was changing in ways Hartwell could not see. Or refused to see. Something old was waking up. Something living in the silence between screams. Something growing with every body buried in the ravine. Cruz was the first to notice. He watched Solomon move and realized something unsettling. Solomon was no longer simply strong. His speed was unnatural. His ability to sense danger was almost animal. His eyes, once full of anger, now glowed with something colder. Something calculating. Something ancient. He is becoming something else, Cruz told himself every night. Something no one can control. The overseers felt it too. They refused to look Solomon in the eye. They whispered about spirits, curses, and ancient protectors who punished men that spilled innocent blood. They crossed themselves when Solomon walked by. They stepped back without knowing why. Fear spread like disease, and the enslaved people felt something even stranger. They felt possibility. Dinah was the center of it. She had known Solomon since he was a boy. She remembered his laughter, his curiosity, his gentle hands before they became weapons. She alone believed that somewhere beneath the hardened shell, the boy she once fed and protected was still alive. But she also saw something powerful rising within him. Something that could change everything. In the tobacco barns and slave quarters, quiet conversations grew bolder. They spoke of rebellion. They spoke of opportunity. They spoke of nights when every overseer watched the pit and every gun pointed toward the fights instead of the fields. Solomon became a symbol, not of fear, not anymore, of strength, of the possibility that a slave could break the world that held them. But the danger was not only inside the quarters. The danger grew among the spectators too. A wealthy man from Georgia named Theodore Grant arrived one night with a group of investors. He had heard the rumors. A fighter who could defeat anyone. A spectacle unlike anything in the South. Grant sat in the front row, a thick man with cold eyes, and watched Solomon dismantle an opponent armed with a fence rail. When the fight ended, Grant did not cheer. He did not clap. He simply leaned forward and whispered to Hartwell, "You have made a monster." Hartwell laughed as if it were a compliment. Grant did not mean it as one. After the event, he wrote a letter that would one day be used as evidence in an investigation. In that letter he described the fight as a ritual of violence. He warned that something terrible would come of it. Something no man would be able to stop. But that letter, like so many warnings, was ignored. Something else occurred that same winter. Something small but important. Something that should have told Hartwell to stop everything. A hunter named Raymond Cole lived 5 miles beyond the plantation. He was known for tracking deer deep into the forest, deeper than most men dared to go. One morning he walked into town pale and trembling. He told the sheriff he had seen something nightmarish near the ravine. He said the ground was covered with bones. He said the earth was slick with dried blood. He said the trees were scratched, as if something with enormous strength had clawed at them. He said he felt like he was being watched the entire time. Watched by something that did not breathe like a man. The sheriff dismissed it as drunken nonsense. But the hunter was sober. He never entered those woods again. His story spread through nearby farms until the forest gained a new name. The Watching Woods. People avoided it after sunset. Animals avoided it at all hours. Even the birds stopped singing there. And every few weeks, another body was thrown into the ravine. More blood feeding the soil. More bones sinking into the dark. More weight pressing on Solomon's mind. Cruz realized Solomon was changing mentally as well as physically. He stopped speaking entirely after one December fight. He no longer responded when spoken to. He sat alone for hours staring into the woods as if waiting for something. As if listening to something calling him. Hartwell said it was focus. Cruz said it was madness. Dinah said it was awakening. The truth was more terrifying than any of them understood. Because on the first night of the new year, something strange happened. Something that made even the overseers whisper in fear. The forest fell silent, not quiet, silent. No wind, no insects, no distant dogs, no owls, nothing. A stillness so heavy it felt unnatural. Solomon stood outside his cabin that night, staring into the woods. The moonlight washed over his skin and the scars running across his chest. His eyes glowed faintly as if catching light from somewhere deep inside instead of reflecting it. Dinah watched from a distance and felt chills run down her spine. He does not look like a man anymore, she thought. And she was right, because something was watching him from the trees. Something that had been growing as he grew. Something hungry. Something waiting. And what happened next would change the plantation forever. Part 5, the night the monster stepped forward. Hook. Imagine waking up and knowing something in your world has shifted. The air feels different. The shadows seem deeper. The silence itself feels alive. And standing in the center of that silence is a man who looks human but no longer feels human at all. A man shaped by violence. A man carved by fear. A man becoming something the world is not ready to face. That man was Solomon, and Part 5 is the night the world around him realized the truth. Part 5. The first morning of the new year began with a cold fog crawling across the plantation. It rolled between the cabins like a living thing, swallowing sound, swallowing light. The enslaved workers stepped out cautiously, rubbing their arms, glancing toward the forest as if expecting something to emerge. They could all feel it. The heaviness, the strange pressure in the air. The memory of last night's silence still clinging to them like frost. Solomon had not slept. He had not moved from his place outside the cabin until sunrise. When the first rays of light touched his face, he blinked slowly, the way an animal does when adjusting to a world it no longer fully belongs to. Dinah approached him with a bowl of food, her hands trembling as she held it. Solomon looked at the bowl, then at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition or confusion or something deeper. Dinah could not tell. Eat, she whispered. You need strength. He took the bowl, but his gaze remained fixed on the trees behind her. Dinah's heart pounded. She felt as if the forest itself was breathing down her neck. Inside the big house, Hartwell woke late with a hangover and a list of plans. New fights, new guests, new profits. He stood before the mirror adjusting his collar, unaware of the way the world around him had shifted overnight. Cruz waited for him at the breakfast table, a cup of cold coffee untouched in front of him. He had not slept either. He had spent the night replaying every moment of Solomon's behavior. The quiet, the stare, the unnatural stillness. Hartwell did not notice Cruz's expression. We should hold the next event sooner, Hartwell said as he poured himself a drink. These men are hungry for entertainment. And the new year means new money. Cruz did not smile. He leaned forward. I think we should cancel the next fight. Hartwell frowned. You said that before. I am saying it again, Cruz replied. Something is wrong with him. Hartwell laughed and waved the concern away. Wrong with him means profit for us. The more monstrous he seems the more they pay. Cruz's voice tightened. Monsters do not take orders. They do not stay in cages. They do not fight only when you tell them to. Hartwell ignored him. He always did. But outside, the enslaved workers sensed something Cruz could not fully explain. They watched Solomon like prey watching a predator. They spoke quietly to one another. They stayed away from the forest. They kept their children close. That afternoon, something happened that confirmed their fear. A young overseer named Milton rode into the woods looking for missing livestock. He was new to the plantation, still full of swagger, still blind to the warnings whispered by men who had been there far longer. He dismounted near the ravine, where fog pooled like water. The silence was crushing. Milton called out for the missing animals. No answer. He stepped closer to the ravine and froze when he saw something half buried in the leaves. A rib cage sticking out of the soil. Human, clean, picked bare. Milton backed away quickly, his breath shaking. Then he heard something move behind him. Something large, something deliberate. He spun around, but the fog was too thick to see through. He never saw the thing that attacked him. He only felt the sudden weight, the crushing pressure, the snap of bone. His horse bolted, screaming into the trees. It reached the fields alone. The body was found that evening. What was left of it? Cruz knew instantly what the overseers whispered that night. They believed Solomon did it. The forest did not kill with such precision. Wolves did not crush bones in straight lines. No animal could break a man like that. Cruz said nothing aloud, but the thought terrified him. Not because he believed Solomon had done it, but because part of him was no longer sure Solomon had not. Hartwell refused to let the death disrupt his plans. He declared it an accident. Wolves or panthers are a fall into the ravine. Anything but the truth. We continue with the next fight, Hartwell said. We cannot let fear control the business. Cruz felt a chill. Fear is the only thing you should be paying attention to. The day of the next event arrived quickly. More than 100 men gathered around the pit, their torches burning against the winter air. The crowd felt restless, excited, hungry for violence. The fight was planned as one of the grandest yet. Solomon versus two armed opponents. One with a reinforced hoe handle. One with a sawed piece of cart axle. The buzz in the crowd was electric. But the enslaved workers refused to go near the pit. They stayed in their cabins. They prayed under their breath. They told their children to close their eyes. Dinah stood alone in the darkness between the cabins and the forest. She watched Solomon being led toward the pit. His walk was smoother than usual. Calmer. Too calm. It terrified her. When Solomon entered the pit, the crowd erupted. Men shouted. Bets were traded. Alcohol spilled. It was chaos. But something felt wrong. Even the spectators sensed it. Solomon stood perfectly still in the center. The opponents circled him with caution. But Solomon did not move. His chest rose and fell slowly. Too slowly. His eyes scanned the crowd as if searching for something unseen. Cruz stepped closer to Hartwell. Call it off. Something is wrong. Hartwell shook his head. They paid for a fight. Then everything changed in a single breath. One opponent rushed toward Solomon with the hoe handle raised. Solomon did not step aside. He did not defend. He simply tilted his head and watched the weapon swing past him as if he knew its path before it moved. Gasps filled the crowd. The second opponent lunged with the axle. Solomon moved faster than any human should. One moment he was still. The next he was behind the man. The crowd screamed as the fight turned from sport to something else entirely. Something unnatural. Something monstrous. And that was the moment Cruz realized the truth. Solomon was no longer fighting for their entertainment. He was fighting for something else. Something the forest had whispered to him in the silence. And whatever it was, it had finally stepped forward. Part 6. Engaging hook. Sometimes the most dangerous ghosts are not the ones hiding in the dark. They are the ones that pretend to protect you. Night settled over the ruins like a heavy blanket, thick and suffocating. Daniel sat near the dying fire, his hands trembling even though the heat touched his skin. The attack in the temple still haunted him. He could still hear the low growl of the stone lions and the roar that did not belong to any living creature. The shadows moved differently now, as if they were alive, listening to every breath he took. Alia came to sit beside him, wiping dust from her clothes. Her eyes were red from crying. Earlier that evening, they buried Kareem near the ancient archway. The place looked peaceful, but both Daniel and Alia knew peace did not exist here. Not anymore. Alia whispered, Daniel, everything is getting worse. I feel something watching us. All the time. Daniel nodded slowly. It was not just fear. It was a feeling like invisible fingers touching their necks, brushing their hair, pulling them towards something unseen. Then, out of nowhere, they heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, too heavy to belong to a man. Alia grabbed Daniel's arm. Is it coming back? Daniel stood up quickly and grabbed the lantern. The flame flickered like it was scared too. He raised it toward the darkness. From between two cracked pillars, an old man appeared. He wore tattered robes that looked older than the ruins themselves. His white beard reached his chest, and his eyes glowed with a strange silver light. Do not be afraid, he said in a calm voice. I am here to help you. Daniel and Alia looked at each other. They were desperate for hope, but something about the man felt wrong. His feet were bare, but there was no sound when he stepped onto the gravel. His robes did not move with the wind, and his shadow seemed to stretch longer than his body. Daniel forced his voice to stay steady. Who are you? The old man leaned closer. I am the guardian of this place. I have watched over these ruins for hundreds of years. I protect those who respect the ancient laws. Alia frowned. Then why are the spirits attacking us? The old man smiled gently. Because you woke something that was meant to sleep forever. But I can show you the way to calm it. If you trust me. Daniel wanted to believe him. He wanted to believe anyone who promised a way out. But deep inside, something tugged at him. A cold instinct that whispered, he is lying. What do you want us to do? Daniel asked slowly. The old man pointed at the largest structure among the ruins. A broken palace wall covered in carvings. In the center stood a massive stone door sealed shut. Behind that door lies the heart of the curse. You must open it. Only then will the spirits stop hunting you. Alia shook her head immediately. No, that door is sealed for a reason. Karim said it should never be opened. The old man sighed. Karim understood only half of the truth. The door is not meant to lock something in. It is meant to lock something out. Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. What do you mean lock something out? The man leaned even closer. There is a creature roaming these ruins. A creature older than your world. It feeds on fear. It escapes every night. You must open the door and trap it inside again. If you do not, it will follow you forever. Alia looked terrified. Daniel could see her hope rising, but also confusion. The old man spoke with confidence. Too much confidence. Like he had rehearsed every word. Daniel finally asked the question he feared most. And what happens after we trap it? The old man smiled. Then you leave this place alive. Daniel studied him carefully. His strange glowing eyes. His silent footsteps. His shifting shadow. Every clue felt like a piece of a puzzle. Daniel whispered to Alia, "Stay behind me." He turned back to the old man. "If we are going to open that door, you should come with us." The old man's smile disappeared for a split second. His eyes flickered. Only once. But it was enough. He answered quickly, "Number. I must prepare the ritual from here. I cannot enter the palace ruins." Daniel felt his heart drop. That was the moment he knew the truth. "You are not protecting us," Daniel said quietly. "You are leading us to something." Alia gasped. The wind stopped. The fire beside them died instantly, like someone pinched out the flame with their fingers. The old man's expression slowly changed. His soft smile stretched unnaturally, wider and wider, until it reached his ears. His silver eyes darkened into black voids. His voice deepened. "You should have listened. You should have obeyed." His shadow rose behind him, growing taller, twisting into something monstrous. Alia screamed. Daniel grabbed her hand and pulled her backward, running as the old man's body began to crack open like an empty shell. Dark smoke poured out of him, forming a creature that looked like crawling darkness. It was the same shadow Daniel had seen earlier in the temple. The same presence that attacked Karim. The same evil that whispered in the night. The creature hissed, sounding like a chorus of 1,000 voices. "The door must open. Only then will I be free." Free. The word echoed in Daniel's mind like a warning. The creature did not want to be trapped. It wanted them to break the seal holding it back. Daniel realized it too late. This thing was manipulating them from the beginning. Alia cried, "Daniel, what do we do?" Daniel looked around desperately. They had no weapons, no protection, no way to outrun a creature made of shadows. But he saw something. On the far side of the ruins, half hidden behind fallen stones, stood a statue. A tall warrior holding a stone spear. On the base of the statue was a symbol. The same symbol they saw earlier on Karim's notebook. Daniel grabbed Alia's arm. "Come on. That statue. I think it is important." The creature shrieked and rushed toward them. The ground shook. The ruins trembled. But Daniel and Alia ran with everything they had. They did not know what would happen next. They only knew that this creature had been hunting them, lying to them, pretending to protect them. Now, it wanted their fear. Daniel reached the statue first and touched the stone symbol. The moment his fingers brushed it, the ground lit up with a circle of glowing light, trapping both him and Alia inside it. The creature crashed against the barrier, screaming in fury. Alia gasped. "Daniel, what is this?" Daniel whispered, "I think we just found the real guardian." The creature roared again, but the barrier held strong. For now, the night was far from over. And the next part of their nightmare was just beginning. If you want, I can create part 7 next. Part 7. Engaging hook. Some places do not want to be remembered. They want to be obeyed. And when you break their rules, they punish you in ways you cannot escape. The glowing barrier around Daniel and Alia flickered like a fragile bubble of light. The shadow creature slammed against it again and again, each hit shaking the ground beneath their feet. Daniel pulled Alia closer as cracks of black mist formed on the outside of the protective circle, like the darkness was trying to squeeze through. Alia breathed heavily. "Daniel, this light will not hold forever." "What do we do?" Daniel stared at the ancient warrior statue in front of them. It stood tall and proud, carved from stone but almost lifelike. The warrior's face was stern, watching Daniel as if expecting him to understand something. Daniel touched the symbol again. The stone felt warm now. A pulse of energy traveled up his arm. For a moment, he saw something not with his eyes but inside his mind. He saw a memory, a battlefield filled with warriors. Fire burning the sky, a monstrous creature made of shadow rising from the ruins. The same creature attacking them now. The warrior in the vision slammed his spear into the ground, creating a circle of light, trapping the darkness inside. It screamed, it twisted, it shrank into nothing. Then the vision snapped away like a candle blowing out. Daniel gasped. The statue, the symbol, the circle, it was all connected. Alia grabbed his arm. What did you see? Daniel looked at her with determination. This statue is the real protector. The guardian the creature warned us about. It trapped this monster once. And we need to learn how it did it. Alia nodded, her fear turning into courage. Tell me what to do. Daniel looked at the warrior's stone spear. It was carved with symbols similar to the ones in Kareem's notebook. He traced them with his fingers. As he touched the carvings, a spark of light glowed faintly, like the statue was waking up after centuries of silence. Behind them, the shadow creature pounded harder against the barrier. Its voice rose in anger, deep and echoing like 1,000 souls crying at once. Let me in, let me in. Alia flinched. That voice. Daniel, it is getting stronger. Daniel forced himself to focus. There had to be a way to activate the statue. A way to summon the warrior's power again. He remembered something Kareem said earlier, hours before he died. Every curse has a trigger. And every curse has a key. Daniel whispered the words to himself. The trigger was fear. The creature fed on it. But the key was something else. Something carved into the stone. He stepped back and looked up at the statue from a distance. Then he saw it. The warrior's hand. It was not fully closed. It was shaped as if meant to hold something. Something missing. Alia noticed it too. What belonged there? Daniel thought hard. Kareem wrote that the ancient guardians always carried 2 sacred items. A spear and a seal. The spear was here, but the seal was missing. Alia's eyes widened. The seal. It was in Kareem's bag. Daniel froze. The bag. It was still lying near the archway where Kareem died. Not far from where the creature now waited, circling the barrier like a hungry animal. Alia felt dread wash over her. Daniel, the bag is outside. How will we get it? Daniel looked at the shadow creature. It dragged its claws across the glowing circle, each stroke leaving long streaks of darkness. It was getting angrier, more desperate. Daniel clenched his fists. I have to go. Alia shook her head instantly. No, you go out there, you will die. The monster will tear you apart. Daniel held her shoulders gently. If we do nothing, this barrier will break. And we will both die here. The only chance we have is to complete the statue. To get the seal. If I run fast, I might make it. Alia's eyes filled with tears. I cannot lose you too. Daniel swallowed hard. Neither of us is dying tonight. I promise. The creature growled, sensing weakness. The barrier flickered again. Alia looked up, terrified. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped to the edge of the circle. Warm energy touched his skin like a warning. He looked back at Alia one last time. When the barrier breaks for a second, I will run. Keep your eyes on me. Do not look at the creature. No matter what. Alia nodded slowly. A crackling sound filled the air. The barrier dimmed. Now. Daniel sprinted. The moment he stepped out, the darkness lunged toward him like a wave. The ground shook under his feet. His ears filled with whispers. Hundreds of voices calling his name. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. He forced himself not to look back. Not even once. He ran past broken stones, jumped over fallen columns, and dashed toward the old archway. Kareem's bag lay half buried in dust, untouched since the attack. He grabbed it just as the creature roared behind him. Its shadow stretched long and thin, reaching for his legs like black tentacles. Daniel threw himself forward, rolling across the ground and scrambling back to his feet. The barrier flickered again, as if calling him home. Alia screamed from inside it. Daniel, hurry. He ran with everything inside him. His lungs burned. His legs felt like fire. The creature's shadow wrapped around his ankle for a split second, cold as death, but he kicked free. He leapt into the barrier just as the creature slammed into it. A blast of light exploded around them, throwing Daniel backward. Alia caught him, tears streaming down her face. "You made it." Daniel breathed hard. "I think so." He opened Kareem's bag. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a stone seal. Round, flat, and carved with the same symbol on the statue. The seal pulsed with faint light, as if recognizing the warrior's statue nearby. Daniel stood up. "Let's finish this." He walked to the statue's open hand and placed the seal into its palm. The moment the stone touched the statue, the entire warrior began to glow. Light filled the cracks. The spear shined. The ground trembled. The barrier expanded outward like a wave, forcing the shadow creature backward. It shrieked in anger and fear. Alia covered her ears. "Daniel, what is happening?" Daniel stared in awe. "The statue is waking up." The warrior's stone eyes lit up like two small suns. Light shot from the seal, rising into the sky like a beacon. The ruins around them hummed with energy. The shadow creature backed away, its form twisting and shrinking. It screamed words Daniel could not understand, ancient and full of hatred. Daniel whispered, "It remembers. It remembers how to fight this thing." The creature launched itself toward the statue with a final roar. The warrior's spear burst with a beam of pure light. The shadow creature was struck in the chest. It convulsed, twisting violently as its body cracked like glass. Darkness poured out of the wounds. It screamed one last time. Then it shattered into smoke. Silence fell over the ruins. Alia collapsed to her knees, trembling. "Is it over?" Daniel looked at the fading light around the statue. The warrior stood still again, returning to lifeless stone. Daniel whispered, "I do not think so. That was just the spirit. The real evil might still be sleeping behind that sealed door." Alia looked toward the massive stone door in the palace wall. It pulsed once. A deep echoing sound came from behind it. A heartbeat. Daniel felt the hair on his neck rise. The creature they fought was only a shadow. The real one was waking up. "If you want, I can write part 8 now." Part 8. Engaging hook. Sometimes the scariest sound is the one that should not exist. A heartbeat in a place where nothing alive should be. Daniel and Alia stared at the massive stone door in the palace wall. The sound that echoed from behind it was slow, deep, and powerful. A heartbeat. But it was not human. It was too heavy, too ancient, too wrong. The ground under them vibrated with every thud. Alia whispered the words she wished were not true. "It is alive in there. Whatever is behind that door is waking up." Daniel swallowed hard. His throat felt like sand. The shadow creature they had just faced had nearly killed them, yet now it felt small compared to what waited beyond the door. The air itself changed, growing colder, thicker, like the ruins were breathing with the heartbeat. Daniel stepped closer to the stone door. Strange carvings glowed faintly on its surface. Human figures. Creatures with wings. Battles between light and darkness. And in the center, the circular symbol from Kareem's notebook, the same one on the warrior statue. Alia placed a hand on Daniel's arm. "Daniel, wait. If we open that thing, we might release the creature that the Guardian was made to trap forever." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know. But we cannot leave this place without understanding what we woke up. If we run now, whatever is inside might break out anyway." The heartbeat grew slightly louder, as if responding to Daniel's voice. Alia felt a chill run through her spine. Or maybe it already senses us. Daniel searched the carvings for clues. Kareem had always believed that ancient civilizations built more than tombs. They built prisons. He remembered something Kareem said during their first week on the site. "Every civilization leaves warnings, but only the ones who want to survive leave instructions too." Maybe the carvings were instructions. Daniel pressed his fingers against the glowing symbols. The light brightened. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. Stones vibrated. Alia grabbed Daniel's shirt. "Daniel, what did you do?" Before he could answer, the entire stone door pulsed with bright red light. A deep groaning sound filled the hall, like something enormous shifting its weight. Then the door cracked open a few inches. A blast of cold air shot out, so cold it felt like knives against their skin. Daniel stumbled backward. Alia screamed. The cold air carried a smell. A mix of earth, rot, and something ancient that Daniel could not identify. Something that had not touched sunlight for thousands of years. The crack widened. Darkness poured out like thick smoke, twisting and curling across the floor. It did not move like normal shadows. It had weight. It had shape. It had hunger. Alia stepped behind Daniel, shaking. Daniel closed the door. Close it now. Daniel pushed against it with all his strength, but the stone would not move. It felt like pushing against a mountain. Then a sound came from inside. A voice. Deep. Rumbling. A whisper that felt like it was being spoken directly into their bones. You woke me. Alia clutched her chest, feeling her heart hammering. Daniel could barely breathe. The voice was too big, too heavy, like it was inside his head. Daniel tried to speak but his voice cracked. Who are you? The answer hit them like thunder. I am the one they feared. The one they tried to bury. The one they failed to kill. The crack in the door widened another inch. Something moved in the darkness. A massive shape. A silhouette with jagged edges like horns or broken wings. Its breath echoed through the chamber, slow and cold. Alia backed away. Daniel, we cannot fight this. The Guardian could not kill it. It only trapped it. Daniel stared at the glowing symbols again. The instructions. There had to be a way. The Guardian statue must have been built with a purpose. Not just to protect the ruins but to protect the world from what was behind this door. Daniel suddenly remembered the seal. The stone disc they had placed in the warrior's hand. The seal glowed again, still pulsing like a heartbeat of light. Daniel rushed to the statue and pulled the seal from its hand. As soon as he touched it, the palace walls shook. The door cracked wider. The dark shape stepped forward, its massive hand pressing against the inside of the opening. The stone door bent under the pressure like soft clay. Alia screamed. Daniel, it is coming out. Do something. Daniel held the seal in front of him. The carvings on its surface glowed brighter. He felt warmth spread up his arm. A strange force filled him, almost like another presence guiding his thoughts. A voice whispered inside his mind. Not evil, not dark, strong, calm, ancient. Place the seal in the circle. Daniel looked down. At the base of the stone door was a shallow carved circle, dust-filled and easy to miss. The same symbol shape, the same size. The seal belonged there. Daniel ran to the door, the darkness curling around his feet like living smoke. It whispered to him. It begged him to stop. It promised him anything. Riches, power, life without fear. Daniel ignored it. He knelt and slammed the seal into the carved circle. The entire palace exploded with light. A wave of golden energy surged outward from the seal. It hit Daniel like a warm wind. It hit Alia like a shockwave that nearly knocked her off her feet. But when the light reached the darkness seeping from the door, it reacted violently. The shadows shrieked. They recoiled. They burned. The shape behind the door roared in anger, shaking the entire building. The seal lit up brighter, as if drawing power from the earth itself. The circle glowed hotter, brighter, then shot a beam of light straight up the door's center. The crack slammed shut. The heartbeat stopped. Silence filled the hall. Daniel collapsed to the floor, breathing hard. Alia ran to him and held his shoulders. Daniel, are you okay? Daniel nodded weakly. I think so. Did it work? Alia looked at the sealed door. The glowing carvings dimmed, the stone returning to its cold dead color. Then she nodded. It is trapped again. But as they both stood in relieved silence, something unexpected happened. The ground trembled. Not a violent shake. A gentle one. Almost like footsteps. Daniel turned slowly. The guardian statue moved. Its stone head turned toward them. Its glowing eyes flickered. Then a sound escaped the statue's stone mouth. A whisper so faint they barely heard it. Run. Before Daniel could respond, the statue cracked. Lines spread across its surface. Stone flakes began to fall off. Its body shook as if struggling to hold itself together. Alia grabbed Daniel's arm. What is happening to it? Daniel already knew. The seal had drained the last of the Guardian's power. The statue was dying, but its warning echoed again in Daniel's mind. Run. Then the entire ceiling above them cracked. Alia screamed. Daniel looked up just as huge stones began to fall. They ran toward the entrance tunnel as the ruins collapsed behind them. The palace shook, dust filled the air, and the sound of breaking stone thundered through the darkness. The ruins were burying themselves, as if trying to hide something forever. Daniel and Alia burst out into the open desert, stumbling onto the sand as the palace entrance caved in behind them. A massive cloud of dust rose into the sky. Alia coughed and looked back at the ruins half buried now under falling rock. Daniel rested on his knees, panting. "It is over," Daniel whispered, but Alia shook her head slowly. "Listen." Daniel froze. In the distance, from somewhere deep beneath the collapsing ruins, they both heard it. A heartbeat. Slow, strong, getting louder. "If you want, I can write part 9 now." Part 9. Engaging hook. Sometimes survival is not about escaping the monster. Sometimes survival is about trying to stay alive long enough to warn the world that the monster is coming. The ruins behind Daniel and Alia were still collapsing, sending clouds of dust swirling into the desert sky. The heartbeat echoed again from somewhere deep underground. This time it was louder. This time it felt closer. Daniel's skin crawled. Alia grabbed his arm so tightly her fingers dug into his skin. "Daniel, it is not trapped. We did not seal it. We only slowed it down." Daniel stared at the ground where cracks zigzagged through the sand like lightning frozen in place. These cracks had not been there moments ago. Something beneath the earth was pushing upward. Something enormous. Something waking. Daniel pulled Alia to her feet. "We need to get to the truck. Now." They ran across the sand, stumbling, coughing from the dust. The sun was sinking behind the dunes and the sky was turning a bloody orange. Their truck sat half buried in sand where they left it that morning. It looked small now. Too small. Too fragile. Like a toy sitting at the edge of a nightmare. Daniel grabbed the door handle and ripped it open. Alia climbed inside and slammed her door shut. Daniel jumped in and turned the key. The engine sputtered. Then nothing. He turned it again. Still nothing. Alia slapped the dashboard. "Come on. Come on." Daniel tried one last time. The engine growled to life. He shifted into gear and the tires spun through the sand as they lurched forward. The desert flew by in a blur as he drove with one hand and wiped sweat from his eyes with the other. Behind them the ground erupted. A fountain of sand shot 20 feet into the air. The sound that followed was so loud Daniel felt it more than he heard it. A deep grinding roar. Metal scraping against stone. Bones bending. Something breaking free. Alia looked out the back window and covered her mouth. "Daniel, do not look. Just drive." But Daniel could not help it. He looked into the mirror. The sand was rising in a massive wave. A shape was emerging from beneath it. Not fully formed. Not fully seen. But large enough that the desert bowed under its weight. A massive arm. A twisted shoulder. Something ancient. Something alive. Its body glowed with a faint red light like a furnace burning inside stone flesh. Daniel turned forward and pressed the accelerator to the floor. The truck shook violently. The desert road was uneven and filled with dips and rocks. The path out was long and narrow between the cliffs. They had to reach the paved road before the truck broke apart. Alia gripped the handle above her seat. "Daniel, that thing is following us." Daniel did not need to look. He felt it. The air behind them was hotter. The ground trembled with every step of the creature. "We are almost at the canyon. Once we pass through there is a military outpost. They will help us. They have radios. They have people. Soldiers. This is no longer archaeology. This is survival." Alia nodded even though fear shook her entire body. As they approached the canyon entrance, the sun finally slipped below the horizon and darkness swallowed the desert. Their headlights cut through the night like two thin blades. The canyon walls rose on both sides, tall and narrow. The road through it twisted like a snake. There was nowhere to hide and nowhere to turn back. The heartbeat behind them grew louder. Faster. Closer. Alia whispered to herself. "Please God. Please help us." Daniel took a sharp turn and the truck skidded. Rocks flew under the tires. The canyon walls seemed to move in closer as if the desert itself wanted to trap them inside with the monster. A sound exploded through the canyon. A scream of pure rage. It echoed off the stone walls and shook loose small rocks that rained down on the truck roof. Alia covered her ears, but it did little to block the sound. Daniel clenched his teeth and kept driving. They reached a straight stretch of road. The last part of the canyon. Beyond it lay the open flatland and then the outpost 10 miles ahead. Daniel breathed a small sigh of relief. Then the ground directly behind them cracked open. A huge hand made of stone and burning veins slammed onto the canyon floor. Another hand followed. Then a head rose above the road. Horned, cracked, glowing, eyes like two dying suns. Alia screamed. Daniel, drive faster. It is climbing out. Daniel pushed the truck to its limit. The engine screamed and the speedometer climbed. The exit of the canyon was less than a mile away. The creature pulled itself fully from the ground. Its massive torso towered between the canyon walls. It had no clear face. No clear shape. It looked like a nightmare carved from rock and fire. It roared again. The canyon walls shook harder. Large boulders started to fall. One crashed behind the truck, sending up a spray of stone shards. Another hit the road near the cliff wall. A huge boulder fell directly in front of them. Daniel screamed and jerked the wheel. The truck skidded sideways. The tires lifted off the ground for a moment, then slammed down hard. Alia hit her head against the window, but she did not stop shouting. Move, move, move. Daniel maneuvered around the boulder and shot forward again. The canyon exit was in sight now. Wide, open, safe. But the creature was not done. It reached forward with an arm so long and wide that it blocked the sky above the canyon like a collapsing ceiling. Daniel saw the shadow fall over them and pressed the accelerator harder. The truck roared in protest. The arm came down. The canyon shook. Dust exploded everywhere. The arm missed them by inches. They burst out of the canyon mouth just as the creature howled. The sky behind them glowed red. The canyon walls cracked under its weight. The monster tried to follow, but its body was too large and the canyon too narrow. It clawed at the opening. Rock shattered. Stone fell. But it could not squeeze through. Daniel kept driving even though his hands shook violently. Alia looked back and spoke in a trembling voice. It is trapped. For now. Daniel did not slow down. He did not look back. He stared at the open road and the dark horizon ahead. He knew she was wrong. Nothing that powerful stays trapped for long. Ahead of them the faint lights of the military outpost flickered in the distance. For the first time since entering the ruins, Daniel felt a small spark of hope. But deep behind them, in the canyon, the heartbeat continued. Louder, stronger, faster, and Daniel understood the terrifying truth. The creature was evolving, changing, learning to free itself. And Part 10 would not be about escape. Part 10 would be about what happens when an ancient evil steps into the world of the living. If you want, I can write Part 10, the final and most intense part. Part 10 Final. Engaging hook. When the darkness finally walks among us, there is no hiding, no running, no chance to survive. Only the brave, the desperate, and the unlucky will witness its fury. Daniel's hands shook on the steering wheel. Alia's fingers were locked around his arm, knuckles white. The military outpost loomed ahead, tiny but solid, like a lighthouse in a storm of shadows. Behind them, the canyon's mouth throbbed with life, glowing faintly red as the creature pressed against its rocky walls. Every heartbeat from the canyon resonated in their chest. Daniel could feel it in his bones. We cannot stop it, he whispered to himself. Not yet. Alia turned toward him, eyes wide. What do we do when it breaks free? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. We just have to survive until help can contain it. Maybe even understand it. The outpost gates came into view. Soldiers were running, grabbing rifles and ammunition, their shouts cutting through the night. Daniel swerved onto the gravel driveway, dust rising behind them. Lights illuminated the truck's path. A soldier stepped in front of the vehicle. Daniel slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded, tires grinding against stone. Alia hit her shoulder against the dashboard. The soldier waved them through frantically. They sped past, barreling toward the main compound. Behind them, the ground cracked again. The creature's massive form surged upward from the canyon. The canyon walls groaned and collapsed as if surrendering to the weight of something impossible. Rocks and dust flew into the sky. The heartbeat was deafening now. It filled the night air with a sound that was alive, hungry, and angry. Inside the compound, military personnel scrambled to load equipment. Explosives, reinforced cages, glowing devices from top-secret research Daniel had only heard rumors about. Something meant to contain or repel forces beyond comprehension. Alia leaned over the hood of the truck. They will not survive long if it breaks free. We have to tell them. Daniel nodded. He ran to the nearest officer. Sergeant, the creature, it is ancient. It is alive. It is coming this way. You need to contain it. The sergeant's eyes widened. We know. We have been tracking seismic activity. It has awakened. The devices are designed to hold it temporarily, but we need the seal. The seal? Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the stone disc he had taken from the Guardian. The one they had used to slow the creature in the ruins. The soldiers gasped. That artifact is what Karim described in his notes. You are the first person to have it in a century. Daniel handed it over. The soldiers studied the carvings, then ran to a large reinforced chamber. Metal and concrete. They arranged devices in a circle. The seal in the center. Alia gripped Daniel's arm. Is this going to work? The sergeant shook his head. It is a gamble. Nothing this ancient can be guaranteed. The ground shook again. The creature emerged fully from the canyon. Its enormous body stretched skyward. Its glowing eyes scanned the desert, locking onto the outpost. Its roar filled the air. Dust and rocks erupted as it moved. Daniel swallowed hard. This is it. The soldiers activated the devices. Energy beams shot toward the sky, surrounding the seal. The creature paused. Its massive head tilted. Its eyes locked on the glowing disc in the center. The heartbeat in the ground stuttered. Then it roared in fury. It lunged. The ground cracked beneath its steps. Stones the size of cars flew into the air. The desert seemed to shake with the sheer weight of it. The soldiers fired explosives. The creature staggered, but the roar did not stop. Daniel and Alia ducked behind a concrete barrier, gripping each other. Then the seal pulsed. Light exploded from it, spreading outward. The beams from the devices converged on the disc. The creature froze. Its roar turned into a hiss, then silence. The heartbeat slowed. Daniel held his breath. The desert grew still. The outpost was quiet except for the wind whipping through broken rocks and sand. The seal worked. But for how long? The sergeant approached, sweat dripping down his face. That thing is contained for now. We can keep it in the chamber, but it will never be destroyed. Not fully. The artifact binds it, slows it, but its power is eternal. Daniel felt a chill. Eternal. Alia leaned against him, whispering. We survived. Daniel nodded, but his eyes never left the canyon. The ruins were gone, buried under falling rock, but something in his chest told him the heartbeat would return. Stronger next time, angrier next time. The sun began to rise over the desert. Light spilled across the outpost, but it did little to warm the fear in their bones. They had survived, but the world would never be the same. Karim's warnings echoed in Daniel's mind. Some things are not meant to be awakened. Some things are meant to be forgotten. Humanity's arrogance had reached too far, and now they had paid the price. Alia squeezed his hand. We tell the world. Daniel shook his head. Not yet. Not until we understand it. People are not ready. If it wakes again, it must be controlled. They watched in silence as soldiers reinforced the chamber. As the glowing seal pulsed faintly, Daniel realized that the nightmare had not ended. It had only been delayed. And in that moment, Daniel understood the truth of the heartbeat. It was a warning, a reminder that some powers are beyond control. That history has secrets for a reason. That the world is fragile and full of things waiting to awaken. The desert was calm for the moment. But Daniel knew better. The heartbeat would return. And when it did, the world would tremble. Alia leaned on him and whispered. We survived together. Daniel nodded. Together, for now. The camera pans across the outpost, the desert, the distant mountains. Dust swirls. The sky is brightening, but in the shadows of the canyon, deep underground, a faint pulse begins again. Slow, strong, eternal. The screen fades to black. If you enjoyed this terrifying journey into history and horror, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more chilling stories. Share this video with friends who love mysteries and ancient secrets. Leave a comment below telling us what part of Solomon's story shocked you the most or where you think the heartbeat will strike next.